In this lecture, I want to talk about the British colonies in North America and the establishment of the United States. In the 17th century, England set up colonies along the coast of North America. Most of the early colonies were set up with the intention of making money, but they were not very profitable as business enterprises. Most of the early settlers were from middle or perhaps lower middle class families who left England because they found conditions at home intolerable. In those days, people had to have good reasons to leave because the journey was perilous and life in the early colonies was full of hardship and danger. And of course, returning home was no easy matter. There were other settlers in North America, besides the English, of course. The Dutch had a settlement in the middle of the coast, which they called New Amsterdam. And this was later captured by the British and was given a new name. They called it New York. And of course, it's still there to this day. There were also Swedish and German settlements. And of course, not all of the people of the colonies came of their own free will. Many Africans were captured in Africa and taken across the Atlantic forcibly against their will and sold there as slaves. By 1750, there were 13 British colonies along the coast. They were generally governed by an official who was appointed in England, but some of them had a fair degree of self-government. They were, of course, protected by the British Army and the British Navy. Their trade was regulated by laws made in England. During the 17th and 18th centuries, this was not a time of free trade, and governments generally placed heavy restrictions on trade and also imposed heavy taxes, as did the British government. And this often led to conflict between the colonies and the British government. The British colonies were on the Atlantic coastal strip, and the area inland was owned by France, or at least claimed by France. I suppose we should really say it was owned by the people who actually lived there, but this was the time of foreign colonies, and so the French believed they owned this land. And it was a huge area, and it was very thinly populated. And as the colonists along the coast, the English colonists, slowly moved west, they came into conflict with the French, of course. And then, from 1756 to 1763, there was a war between Britain and France, and this is called the 7 Years' War, for the obvious reason that it lasted 7 years. It was fought in many different countries, actually. It was fought partly in India, and in the West Indies, and also, of course, in North America. France was defeated and lost vast areas of land to the British, the land to the interior of the British colonies. This land was given up by France, and consequently a great deal of new land was made available to the British colonies for westward expansion, to expand inland. And as a result, many people who lived in the American colonies started to move westward and occupy this land that had been French land. The war had cost Britain a great deal of money, and the government felt that the people who lived in the colonies should pay a share of that cost, as they had benefited greatly from the French defeat. However, when the government of George III tried to impose new taxes, the colonists resented this very, very much. And the situation, I mean, there was much opposition, and the situation slowly got worse until there were outbreaks of fighting and trouble. And at first, of course, this was not called a war, but then in about 1776, at that time, probably only about a third of the people living in the British colonies were actively thinking about independence. But in that year, a group of people met in Philadelphia and issued the very famous Declaration of Independence. This was drawn up mainly by Thomas Jefferson, and it was influenced by the ideas of Locke and Rousseau, philosophers. And it said some wonderful things. It stated that all men are equal and all have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Of course, in practice, this did not apply to the residents of African descent. Slavery was not abolished in the United States until the middle of the 19th century. Anyway, the Declaration of Independence led to war. The British on the one hand and the American colonists on the other. The British had a large army and a very powerful navy. On the American side, they had a good general, George Washington, and an untrained army, but nevertheless a very enthusiastic army. The colonists also had help from French, of course, enemies of the British, and a number of other foreign countries. In Britain, the war was not popular at all. The British people were very, often many of them supported the colonists. There was a great deal of sympathy towards them. They of course, the British people, of course, saw these colonists as British people at war with their government. And the course of the war is, of course, much celebrated in the United States. And the Americans did win some victories, of course. But in my opinion, the British lost the war because they really didn't have a heart for it. The British forces were not really deeply committed to the struggle. They had, as I said, a great deal of sympathy with the colonists. In 1781, negotiations started, and then in 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed, and the British were very, very generous in the terms they granted to the colonists, and the colonists became independent, and they were granted a much, much greater area of land than they had had before. After the war, a form of government was set up in the colonies which was not a success. So then in 1787, a convention was set up to prepare a new constitution for the colonies. And this constitution set up a federal system where each state was semi-independent, but only the central government, the federal government, could do certain things such as declare war, regulate trade, or print money. This Constitution of the United States was adopted in 1788, and in the following year, George Washington, the general who had led the forces during the American War of Independence, George Washington became the first president of the United States, and thus the United States, as we know it now, was established.